This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, we all know that during Aseret Simei Tshuva we make certain additions to the Shemona Esrei. Most importantly, we say, instead of Hakel HaKadosh, HaMelech HaKadosh. Right, we say instead of Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat, HaMelech HaMishpat. We say Zachreinu L'chaim. We say Michamoich Avarachamim. We say Uchsoiv L'chaim Tovim Komnei Risecha and B'Sefer Chaim. The four last Tosafos, Zachreinu, Michamoicha, Uchsoiv, B'Sefer Chaim, are not ma'akev. If you missed it, you missed it. Hamelech HaMishpat. So ultimately, you don't have to repeat the Shemona Esrei. But we all know that if someone did not say Hamelech HaKadosh, they need to repeat the Shemona Esrei.
That's the only one, actually.
That's what I just said. Now, what's the halacha if somebody is mesupak, somebody is in doubt whether they said Hakel HaKadosh or Hamelech HaKadosh? What's the halacha?
You have to repeat.
You need to repeat.
Talk to Dave before you say it again, right?
No, you're mesupik. You're mesupik.
You don't have to repeat it because it's a bottom.
You would think that since it's a suffix, so Safek Darbanim Lakula, but the answer is it's not a suffix. If you're mesupik, if you say it, we assume you didn't say it, because we say Shigra Delishna Nakat. You presumably said what you're accustomed to saying, which is Hakel HaKadosh, and therefore we assume you said Hakel HaKadosh, not HaMelech HaKadosh. Now, what about if the night of Rosh Hashanah you're davening from a machzor and you said right, the whole thing. And then after you're davening for the machzor, you say to yourself, 1 second, did I say Hakel HaKadosh or did I say HaMelech HaKadosh? So normally we say if you're mesupik what you said, well, we'll assume that you said the regular weekday davening. But the night of Rosh Hashanah, you're davening from the machzor. You said the rest of the nusach properly. Presumably, if you said the same Teim Pachtacha, and you said the whole nusach of the Yom Naram, presumably you did say HaMelech HaKadosh. Here's the question. The question is the following. What if the night of Rosh Hashanah, you said everything Gavaldik? The same Teim Pachtacha, Simcha Li'artzecha, you said everything wonderful. The only thing is you ended off Hakel HaKadosh. So we would say, of course you have to go back and daven Shemona Esrei again. And yet, the Chayei Adam brings down the psak of Rabbi Aveli Fasveler. Rabbi Aveli Fasveler, who says a din mechudash, that if the night of Rosh Hashanah you definitely did not say HaMelech HaKadosh, you don't have to repeat Shemona Esrei. Huh?
Is that the same like Rosh Chodesh?
Who's Rabbi Fasveler?
He was very great.
Spanish guy.
Look at what the Chayei Adam writes. Chayei Adam writes like this. Number 1. Bracha Gimel Nikres Kedushas Hashem. The third bracha of Shemona Esrei is called Kedusha. Shehi Ata Kadosh. V'choisei Hakel HaKadosh. V'im ta v'siyen HaMelech HaKadosh ein tzarich lachzor. If during an ordinary day of the year, instead of saying Hakel HaKadosh, you said HaMelech HaKadosh, you don't go back. Uv'asar simei tshuva mesayim HaMelech HaKadosh. V'im ta v'siyem Hakel HaKadosh. Then like this. Im niskar techadei dibar HaMelech HaKadosh yatsa. If you remember, within the amount of time it takes to say Shem Alechem, Rebbe Umayri, you're Yotze. V'im lav tzarich lachzor l'rosh. V'uhadin im mesupak imamar tzarich lachzor l'rosh. So you say, well, maybe I'll do a trick. I'll say 90 times, Baruch atah Hashem HaMelech HaKadosh, Baruch atah Hashem HaMelech HaKadosh, Baruch atah Hashem HaMelech HaKadosh. This way, in case I'm in doubt, I can assume I said it correctly, right? We have a trick like that for Mashbrach Marag Hashem, for the same Talamata Levracha. Can I have a trick like that for HaMelech HaKadosh? No. Because what are you going to say? Hashem's name? Baruch atah Adonai. Can't say God's name 90 times. Ve'hagoin, Mareinu, Harav, Aveli, Fasveler. Amar kan din mechudash. He wants to advance a novel din. She'im tabel al Rosh Hashanah. If the night of Rosh Hashanah you made a mistake. V'lo yamar HaMelech HaKadosh einoi tzarich lachzor. You don't have to go back. Why? How could that be?
You said HaMelech HaKadosh, you say.
If you definitely did not say HaMelech HaKadosh, says Rabbi Aveli Fasveler, you do not have to go back the night of Rosh Hashanah. You know why? He says like this, what Eli was saying. Because what's the halacha if a person forgot Yalav Yavai the night of Rosh Chodesh? The night.
Any night.
Any night.
You don't have to go back.
Any night.
But this
What's halacha if you forgot Yalav Yavai the night of Rosh Chodesh? You don't go back. Why not? Because Bezdin is not Mechadesh the Chodesh until the Yom. So even though technically it's Rosh Chodesh, but since Bezdin is not Mechadesh the Chodesh until the day, you don't have to say, you have to say Yalav Yavai. But if you didn't, we'll let it fly. So too, the night of Rosh Hashanah, it's Rosh Hashanah. But Bezdin is not Mechadesh the Chodesh until the day. So therefore, if at the night of Rosh Hashanah, instead of saying Hamelech HaKadosh said Hakel HaKadosh, we will let it go, says Rabbi Bailey Fasfeller.
But during the day you would have to repeat.
And rather during the day you have to repeat. But during the night, the same way Yalav Yavai, if you miss during the day, you go back. But during the night, you don't go back. So too, if you forget Hamelech HaKadosh during the day, you go back. If you forget it, at least the first night of Rosh Hashanah, we will see, you don't go back.
Does the Mishnah Berurah paskin like that?
Let's see.
The second night, what Rav Fosfeller would say on the second night?
Let's see. Okay? Okay.
You want the whole share?
Eino tzarech lachzar. Why? Kedin ta'ar b'lo hisker Yalav Yavai b'leil Rosh Chodesh she'eino tzarech lachzar. Why is the halacha if you forgot Yalav Yavai the first night of Rosh Chodesh, you don't have to go back? Machmas she'ein mekadshin es hachodesh b'layla, because we do not sanctify the month and night. Imkain gam b'leil Rosh Hashanah hadin kain. If so, the night of Rosh Hashanah should be the same thing. She'ein tzarech lachzar, that you don't have to go back. Okay, very interesting. Very interesting psak. Not so well known. Everyone is all into Hamelech HaKadosh, right? Everybody knows if you miss it, you have to stay over the Shmoneh Esrei. No, not so fast. Not the first night of Rosh Hashanah. Says the Chai Adam in the name of Rabbi Aveli Fasfeller. You don't have to go back. The same way you don't go back if you miss Yalav Yavai at night. You don't go back if you missed Hamelech HaKadosh. Again.
This is only the first night.
Now, Rabbi say, we're talking about where you daven the regular Shmoneh Esrei of Rosh Hashanah. It's just you didn't say Hamelech HaKadosh.
So would he say that if you made a mistake and you were davening the Shmoneh Esrei from Chol and you didn't daven Shmoneh Esrei, so there if you said Hakel HaKadosh,
You want to know what if you daven the Vachadika Shmoneh Esrei night of Rosh Hashanah? We will see. Okay. Comes along.
So if the toast wasn't, that you davened the Shmoneh Esrei and you forgot, it's one thing. But if you had said the wrong Shmoneh Esrei and forgot, okay, we'll see.
Comes along the Shailas Tshuvas Mayim Chayim from Hagoin Morenu Harav Chaim Rappaport. And he says like this.
Hakoyin.
Kasav Zel Shoinai. He quotes the psak of Rabbi Aveli Fasfeller. V'hagein Morenu Aveli Fasfeller Nero Yor Amar Kandin Mechudash. Shem B'la Rosh Hashanah L'Yamar Hamelech HaKadosh Shein Tzarech La'asor Mitam Shein Mekadshin HaChodesh B'layla. He said, I don't get what the man is talking about. That's not exactly how he says it, but B'neflesi, it's a wonder. De'ishtamit Lahu Divrei Rabbeinu Yaina. Rabbi Aveli Fasfeller forgot the words of an open Risha in B'perk Tfilas HaShachar, V'huva B'beis Yosef. It's brought in Beis Yosef, Barachem, Sim Tavkov Pei Beis B'seifai. V'zel Hashoinai. Let's read it in Rabbeinu Yaina himself in number 3. Right? Islam Afarshi. What's the halacha if the night of Yom Tiv, let's say Pesach night, you daven the weekday Shmoneh Esrei? Do you have to repeat the Shmoneh Esrei? Of course. What about the night of Sukkot? You said a weekday Shmoneh Esrei. Do you have to repeat? Yeah. What do you mean? But if you forgot Yalav Yavai the night of Rosh Chodesh, you don't have to go back. So why do you have to go back if you didn't daven the Yom Tov Tikka Shmoneh Esrei? But I thought the Bezdin is not Mechadesh until the day.
They're two different things.
Why are they two different things?
One is
you're saying you have to be Mekadosh the Yom Tov.
Yeah.
That's one thing.
We're not Mekadosh until the day. You need the Bezdin is not Mekadosh until the day.
The Kiddush is more important.
Okay, leave it go, Nate.
Oh, Kiddush is more important at night than the daytime.
The answer is there's a big difference between Yom Tif and Rosh Chodesh. What is that? Rosh Chodesh is telling only in Kiddush HaChodesh. So therefore Kiddush HaChodesh is during the day. But Yom Tif there's an Isser Malacha. And when does the Isser Malacha start? At night. So then, therefore, you must say the Yom Tif Dikar Shmoneh Esrei. So there's a major distinction between Rosh Chodesh and Yom Tif.
Well, Rosh Hashanah is some malachas at night too.
Yeah, every Yom Tif is Isser Malacha at night.
So maybe you should say...
One second.
Maybe you should say even if you do a malach on Yom Tov night, you shouldn't be chayav v'chatas.
No.
Because it's not Yom Tov, they're machadish in the day.
No.
You should say that too.
We don't say that.
Why?
What? Because it's Yom Tif. Because they're already Mekadesh the Chodesh about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, but it doesn't kick in until in the morning.
It kicks in. The Isser Malacha kicks in. Look at Rabbeinu Yonah. The Istim Mefarshi, there are those who say that the halacha, right? We all know if you don't say the Yom Tov Dikar Shmoneh Esrei at night, you need to repeat the Shmoneh Esrei. Says Rabbeinu Yonah, the Istim Mefarshi, there are those who say the Dafka B'Shai Yom Tovim. That's only other Yom Tovim. Aval B'Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah, but the Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah, Kivan Shetali B'Rosh Chodesh, since Rosh Hashanah is dependent on Rosh Chodesh, Im Tav L'Hizkar Shel Yom Tov Ba'arvis, if you daven the Vacha Dikar, some say, if you daven the Vacha Dikar Shmoneh Esrei the night of Rosh Hashanah, you don't have to go back by Rosh Hashanah. We could treat it like Rosh Chodesh. But okay, you hear? Where Rabbeinu Yonah is saying there are some shittas that say if you say a weekday Shemona Esrei Pesach night, you go back. Sukkot night, you go back. Shavuos night, you go back. But not Rosh Hashanah. Because Rosh Hashanah is like Rosh Chodesh. Just like Rosh Chodesh is it's only ma'akiv during the day, so to the Rosh Hashanah it's only ma'akiv during the day.
What about the Yisum Malacha?
So comes Rabbeinu Yonah and he says that no, there's a difference between Rosh Chodesh and Rosh Hashanah. V'nucha loimer, says Rabbeinu Yonah, she'af al pi shetali b'Rosh Chodesh, even though it's dependent on Rosh Chodesh, kivan shehu Yom Tif, since Rosh Hashanah is Yom Tif, u'mitzvahs Yom Tif alima tfei, and Yom Tif is stronger than Rosh Chodesh. Why is Yom Tif stronger than Rosh Chodesh? Because you have sheyesh ba Isser Malacha, ma she'ein kein b'Rosh Chodesh. Uvetfila gam kein ein anu maskirin in Rosh Chodesh klal. On Rosh Hashanah we don't even talk about Rosh Chodesh. Ella in Yom Tif yoiser yesh lanu ladin oisay kama Yom Tif miladin oisay kama Rosh Chodesh v'im lahizker ba'arvis me'ein Yom Tif machzirin oisay. Let me clarify for a moment. Everyone agrees if you miss Yalav Yavai the night of Rosh Chodesh, you don't have to say it over because the Chodesh is not Mekudash until the morning. But everyone agrees that Yom Tif it's already Mekudash from the night because Rosh Chodesh was already settled 14 days earlier or 7 days earlier. So everyone agrees Yom Tif kicks in immediately, nothing to do with Isser Malacha. Because we know.
It's set. Once you know Rosh Chodesh, you know when Yom Tov is.
Right. The question is, how are we going to treat Rosh Hashanah? Are we going to say, well, Rosh Hashanah is Rosh Chodesh, that means it doesn't really kick in until the day? Or do we say, no, the Isser Malacha already begins from the evening, and since the Isser Malacha begins from the evening, you need to have daven the Yom Tov, the Shmoneh Esrei from the evening. It's different than Rosh Chodesh. How does Rabbeinu Yonah conclude? Rabbeinu Yonah concludes that on Rosh Hashanah you must say the Yom Tov Dikar davening because since the Yisr Malacha begins at night, you better have davened the Yom Tov Dikar davening from the nighttime. Says the Shas of Shivas Mayim Chayim. If Rabbeinu Yonah concludes that Rosh Hashanah is not like Rosh Chodesh, because Rosh Chodesh does not have Yisr Malacha, and Rosh Hashanah has Yisr Malacha, so then Rabbeinu Yonah is saying very clearly, if you don't say the Yom Tov Dikar Shmoneh Esrei the night of Rosh Hashanah, you need to go back. So it would come out then, if you don't say HaMelech HaKadosh the night of Rosh Hashanah, you should have to go back. So what's Rav Aveli Fassfeller talking about? That, well, Hamelech HaKadosh should be like Yalav Yavai. No, there's a major difference between Hamelech HaKadosh and Yalav Yavai. Yalav Yavai is dependent on Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh doesn't kick in really 100% till the day. But Hamelech HaKadosh is dependent on the Yom Tif. And the Yom Tif already kicks in at night with the Yisr Malacha.
What does Rav Aveli say about the Yisr Malacha? I mean, they're definitely different.
No.
He doesn't hold that that's enough to make a difference.
It almost sounds like he holds like the students of Rabbeinu Yonah, who Rabbeinu Yonah rejected, that the students of Rabbeinu Yonah say that Rosh Hashanah is like Rosh Chodesh. despite the fact that there's an Isser Malacha, but nevertheless, since it's the first day of the month, we don't know that it's Yom Tov yet until the day. Then retroactively, there was an Isser Malacha from the evening. But look what the Mayim Chaim asks. Look at number 2. 2 lines from the end. Right? Ad kan l'shon Rabbeinu Yonah. Harei mefura shaloi kidvarav. It is clear, not like Rabbi Veli Fasfeller. Again, the psak of Rabbi Veli Fasfeller was, if you daven the Rosh Hashanah Dika Shmona Esrei, and all you forgot was Hakel HaKadosh, HaMelech HaKadosh, you don't go back. Just like, what was the analogy? The analogy was to Ya'alav Yaveh, the night of Rosh Chodesh.
But he would say more.
But Rabbeinu Yonah, we see not like him, because Rabbeinu Yonah says clearly that the Shemona Esrei of Rosh Hashanah is not like Ya'alav Yaveh, the night of Rosh Chodesh. Ya'alav Yaveh, the night of Rosh Chodesh, is dependent on Kiddush HaChodesh, which is only done during the day. But the Shemona Esrei of Yom Tif is dependent on Isser Malacha, which begins at the night already.
Veli would appear to me would hold only also that if you daven the Vakta Dika Shmona Esrei on Erev Rosh Hashanah at night, you also wouldn't have to go back. Because you're not Mekudesh the Yom until the morning.
But that
not
far,
only Amel HaKadosh, it's the Shemona Esrei itself.
but for some reason, that far he doesn't go.
Why?
Okay, you're asking very good. But right now, all as far as he's gone is, he didn't say that if you daven the weekday Shemona Esrei, you don't have to go back. He just said if you daven the Yom Tov, and you said Hakel HaKadosh, you don't have to go back. But we're saying Rabbeinu Yonah goes so far as to say, Rabbeinu Yonah says not like that. Why? Because Rabbeinu Yonah says if you daven the weekday Shemona Esrei, you're not Yotzei. Now, we could say Rabbeinu Yonah didn't say if you said Hakel HaKadosh, you're not Yotzei. Rabbeinu Yonah only said if you daven the weekday Shemona Esrei, you're not Yotzei. And but as of now, what's the distinction?
The funny thing is, like for Mincha, the Bachar Shemona Esrei comes from Irish, so sometimes you can be confused what Shemona Esrei you're going to be saying.
Right.
I'll ask additionally, what would they both say if you daven the Vakta Dika Shmona Esrei and said Amel HaKadosh?
Oh, so what about on a regular Tuesday? If you say, let's say today, instead of saying Hakel HaKadosh, you say HaMelech HaKadosh.
You have to repeat.
You don't go back. Chayadim says you don't go back.
No, go back.
Why should it go back?
So question number 1 that's being asked on Rabbi Veli Fasfeller is what? That he's not like Rabbeinu Yonah, because Rabbeinu Yonah says if you daven a Vachadik Shemona Esrei the night of Rosh Hashanah, you must go back. It's different than Rosh Chodesh V'Ya'alav Yaveh. Rosh Chodesh V'Ya'alav Yaveh, it's only dependent on Kiddush HaChodesh, which is during the day, but Yom Tif is dependent on Isser Malacha. Look in the Beis HaLevi. This is not the Beis HaLevi on Chumash, this is the Beis HaLevi on the Shas Tshuvas Beis HaLevi. Rabbi Beis HaLevi says, I have a different kasha, I have a better question for you. Forget about the fact that he's against Rabbeinu Yonah. It doesn't make any sense what the guy's doing. To daven a half a Vacha Dika Shmona Esrei and a half a Yom Tif Dika Shmona Esrei. He's saying the same Teim Pachta and Hakel HaKadosh. Doesn't make any sense. He said, it's a Tarti the Sasri. Make up your mind. Is it Rosh Hashanah or is it not Rosh Hashanah? It's a Stira Minei Obey. Look at number 4. Masha Kasav Achai Adam Hilchos Tefillah. Din Mechudash. Din Lo Yomer HaMelech HaKadosh Ba'arvis Laila Rishon Shel Rosh Hashanah. De'ein Machzir Noisai K'may B'Ya'alav Yaveh B'Rosh Chodesh De'ein Mekadshon HaChodesh B'Laila. Says the Beis HaLevi, I would understand if Rabbi Veli Fasfeller would say that if b'diavad you daven the Vacha Shemona Esrei the night of Rosh Hashanah, you're Yaitse. Why? Because at least, you in your mind, you think it's still a weekday. But here's the guy, what's the guy doing? The guy's davening half a Rosh Hashanah Shemona Esrei, and then he's concluding with a weekday conclusion. That doesn't make any sense. Just for Azul, Shayach Ela B'Hatfila, B'Hispala Tfila Shachol Legamri. Avo B'Hispala Shal Rosh Hashanah, V'Layomer HaMelech HaKadosh, V'adai D'Chayzer. Because what are you going to say, right? You want to come on to the Svara, well, Bezdin wasn't Mekadesh the Chodesh yet. Well, Bezdin wasn't Mekadesh the Chodesh yet. What in the world were you doing? Saying, the same Teim Pachtacha, the same Teim Kavod, right? The Simcha Le'artzecha. You can't have it both ways. Don't try to pull out the card that Bezdin wasn't Mekadesh yet. Then what were you doing for the last half hour? What does the Mishnah Berurah say about Rabbi Veli Fasfeller? Reb Zelig.
Yeah.
In the Sharat Tzion, the Mishnah Berurah, first of all, he quotes Rabbi Veli Fasfeller, And then he says on the second line, Lo nehira. Because you could only, he asked the same kasha of the Beis HaLevi, you could only pull out the card that Bezin wasn't Mekadesh the Chodesh yet, if you want to say, the guy davened the weekday. But if the guy in middle switched, and for the last half hour he was davening Rosh Hashanah, he can't tell me, well, dog, what do you want me to say? You want me to say it's Rosh Hashanah? It's not Rosh Hashanah. Bezin didn't do anything yet. And that is why the Steichemet writes, not like Rabbi Veli Fasfan, that if somebody forgets HaMelech HaKadosh the first night of Rosh Hashanah, you got to go back. And I even have a sefer from one of the big poskim in Lakewood today, Reb Shmuel Felder. He says, Roiv Achroinim do not agree to this Chiddush of Rabbi Veli Fasfan. Like the Steichemet says, and like the Mishnah Berurah disagrees, and he concludes that the first night of Rosh Hashanah, if you don't say Melech HaKadosh, you got to go back. Rabbi say, not so fast. Not so fast.
Not go back.
He says, Roiv Achroinim say you got to go back.
Don't back up so fast.
Comes along the Binyan Shloimeh, and he says an amazing thing, an amazing svara, and this svara is also given by Hagayin Rav Moshe Feinstein and the Igros Moshe. And they both explain Rabbi Veli Fasfeller knew exactly what is Reb Shloimeh HaKoyin Mivilna, the author of the Cheshek Shloimeh.
He was a Talmud of the Goin.
Is the
I don't know.
17th or the 18th or 19th?
His brother was Reb Tzalel HaKoyin Mivilna. And Reb Shloimeh HaKoyin Mivilna,
When do they live?
by the way, Reb Nachum, Reb Nachum was Rosh Shiva Namir. He was a descendant of the Cheshek Shloimeh. So he says like this. The analogy between Hakel HaKadosh, Hamelech HaKadosh and Yalav Yavai is perfect. Why? What do you mean? Rabbeinu Yoina said, what does Rabbeinu Yoina say about a guy who davens a weekday Shemana Esrei on Rosh Hashanah?
Yes, to repeat.
The night of Rosh Hashanah. You
Yes,
got to
to
repeat.
repeat.
Why? Because there's a difference between Yalav Yavai. Isser Malacha. So by the same token, the Mayim Chaim asks on the Rabbi Veli, well, if there's Isser Malacha, then you have to say HaMelech HaKadosh. That's question number one. Question number two was, it's a Tarti Desasri. Make up your mind. Is it Rosh Hashanah or is it not Rosh Hashanah? Says the Binyan Shloimeh, says Rav Moshe Feinstein, we don't say HaMelech HaKadosh because of the Kedushas Yom Tov. The reason why we say HaMelech HaKadosh instead of Hakel HaKadosh is because now we have the holiness of Yom Tov. It's nothing to do with Kedushas Yom Tov. And I'll add, we say it during the Aseret Simei Tshuva. It's not Yom Tov then, so why do we say it? We say it because this is the time that God is judging us. It has nothing to do with Yom Tov. It has nothing to do with Kedushas Yom Tov. We say it because God is sitting on His throne of Malchus, on His throne of Mishpat. Now let me ask you a question. When does God start to sit on His throne of Mishpat? When does the judgment start? The Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, look at number 9, Tana Rabbanon, Ki chayk li Yisrael, hu Mishpat l'elokei Yaakov, melamed she'ein bezdin shalmayla nichnasin ledin ela imkain kidshu bezdin shalmata es hachodesh. God does not begin to judge until bezdin shalmata sanctifies the new moon. When does Bezdin sanctify the moon?
Rabbeinu Yonah doesn't hold from that, obviously.
When does one second, good question, what we're going to end. When does Bezdin sanctifies the moon in the day. So, therefore, let me ask you a question. The addition of HaMelech HaKadosh, is it dependent on Kedushas Yom Tov, which begins at the night, Be'isr Malacha? Or is it dependent on when the judgment begins?
So why don't we start saying HaMelech HaKadosh and Chakras? Why are we saying it's Tamasai?
Because Lamaisa,
Lamaisa
it's Rosh Hashanah. Lamaisa, it's Rosh Hashanah, and it's Aseret Simei Tshuva, and it's a time of, it's the general time frame of, but
you can't have it both ways.
No. But I'll prove to you.
It's the same thing.
I'll prove.
The other way.
I'll prove to you. You can have it both ways. You know what's the proof?
Yeah.
Why do you say Yalav Yavai the night of Rosh Chodesh? But I thought it's not specifically Rosh Chodesh until Bezdin's Mekadesh the
Why are we saying?
The answer is because it's in Judaism we begin with the night, and even though it's technically not not being enacted until the morning, but we begin saying it when it's Rosh Chodesh, and you're supposed to say it l'chadchila, and if you don't say it, you're doing something wrong. But nevertheless, if you miss Ya'aleh V'yavai at night, you don't go back, because since technically it doesn't begin until the next day, you don't go back. The same thing with HaMelech HaKadosh. HaMelech HaKadosh is not specifically tied into Kedushas Yom Tov. The Yom Tov, Dikish Shmoneh Esrei, is dependent on Yom Tov. Yom Tov begins when there's a Melacha. Therefore, Rabbeinu Yonah says, if you daven a weekday Shmoneh Esrei, the night of Rosh Hashanah, what do you have to do? You have to go back. But when it comes to HaMelech HaKadosh is exactly analogous to Ya'aleh V'yavai. Why? But Rabbeinu Yonah said if you daven the weekday Shmoneh Esrei, you're not Yitzhak. The weekday Shmoneh Esrei, you can't daven. You have to daven Yom Tov Dikar Shmoneh Esrei, because it's Yom Tov at night. But HaMelech HaKadosh, this is a beautiful svara, a very emistic svara. HaMelech HaKadosh is not dependent on Kedushas Yom Tov. It's dependent on the din. And the din does not begin until Bezin is Mekadesh the Chodesh. That is the defense of Rabbi Aveli Fasveler given by the Binyan Shloimeh and given by Rav Moshe.
Well, I'm going to ask, so why, if we now say that HaMelech HaKadosh is uniquely tied to when HaKadosh Baruch Hu starts to sit in din,
yeah,
and during the Aseres Yimei Shuvah, it's not Yom Tov, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is still sitting in din the same way he's sitting on Rosh Hashanah. We know that the din is determined
Rosh Hashanah.
Rosh Hashanah. Now we had a whole shiur about where. Then you shouldn't say HaMelech HaKadosh. You should say HaKadosh HaKadosh. Say it again on Yom Kippur, maybe.
He's judging.
It's not related to the... No,
he's judging.
It's not the same level of din. The din already is, we know, is already put in the book. Maybe it's not sealed, but it's put in the book.
In other words, he's not writing, he's not signing, but he is on the Kisei Shel Mishpat.
So in the Aseres Yimei Shuvah, if you say HaKadosh HaKadosh, you shouldn't have to repeat. On Rosh Hashanah,
No. But he's on the throne of judgment. His role is, and he's the judge right now. Just because the judge has certain times that he records, that he writes, that he seals, but as long as he's in that room, donning the garb, the robe of judgment. Now, what we're saying is the robe of judgment God does not don until the morning. So even though technically we're supposed to say it at night already, but if you didn't say it, you don't have to. Now take a look. Look at number 8. Look on the last paragraph of number 8. Ve'amnam lanias daiti nira tedivrei hagoyin mareno Rav Aveli Fasveler shririn v'kayamin. What does that mean? La shiri, right? We say in Kol Nir, La shiririn v'la kayam, right? They should not be upheld. So he's upholding the words of Rabbi. Umeirim kashemesh b'tzaharayim. They illuminate like the sun. Be'eno inyan klala divrei Rabbeinu Yonah. They have no connection to Rabbeinu Yonah. V'hu behektem hatam. And we'll give the following introduction. Shetiknu chazal loimer hamelech hakadosh v'hamelech hamishpat b'aseres yimei tshuva. Diyadua why? Mishum shehem yimei dinu mishpat. V'hakadosh baruch hu shoifed as kol ha'olam kula. God's judging the whole world. Umizeh hatam. There's a reason nami tiknu chacham loimer psukei malchios. Dine kfar shaninu bebraisa. We learned in a braisa in Masechta Rosh Hashanah Daf Ches ki choik li Yisrael hu mishpal lekei Yaakov ein li elo Yisrael. I only know God's judging the Jews. L'umay soilam minayin. How do I know Hashem is judging the Goyim? Talmud loymar mishpal lekei Yaakov. Im kein ma Talmud loymar ki choik li Yisrael melamed she'ein bezdin shalmala nechnasim ladin elo im kein kitchu bezdin shalmata. What emerges here is the ein maschil hadin b'Rosh Hashanah bevezdin shalmayla rak b'yayim. What emerges from this brisa, instead of mila, it should say mala, is that the bezdin does not begin to adjudicate until the day. La'achar shekitshu bezdin shamatzas hachodesh. So you don't bring me the words of Rabbeinu Yonah. What does Rabbeinu Yonah got to do with this? Rabbeinu Yonah is saying, if you don't say the Yom Tov Dikar Shmoneh Esrei, you got to go back. Of course, because Yom Tov starts at night, the Yisur Malacha starts at night. You better say the Kedushas Yom Tov. But in terms of the din aspect, din is not dependent on Yom Tov. Din is dependent on the Bezdin Shamala. Bezdin Shamala.
The Beis Halevi.
The Beis Halevi. Oh, let's address the Beis Halevi's kasha. Beis Halevi asked, "It's Tarti Desasri. Right. How could? You want to say that it's not Yom Tov yet? So what were you doing for the last hour? It's not a Tarti Desasri. I never said it's not Yom Tov. Of course I hold it's Yom Tov. That's why I daven the Rosh Hashanah Dika. No. Listen carefully. I hold it's 100% Yom Tov. And that's why I daven the Yom Tov Dika Shmona Esrei. But HaMelech HaKadosh got nothing to do with Yom Tov. It has nothing to do with Kedushas Yom Tov. It's dependent on the din. And the din doesn't begin until the day.
Don't say that whole paragraph.
No.
That
That whole paragraph is Kedushas Yom Tov. That's the Yom Tov Dika Shmona Esrei. That's not because of the din. That's because of Yom Tov. And Avada Yom Tov begins on the night because of the Yisr Malacha. They were asking, it's a self-contradiction. Either it's Yom Tov or it's not Yom Tov. No, not a Tarti the Sasri. It's not Yom Tov. Okay? He says like this. V'hayoytzi lanu mibraisa hazu. What emerges? Dein maschen hadin b'Rosh Hashanah b'bezin shamala ela imkein kitshu bezin shamata. The alpi hatzazu based on this chiddush. Yafeh kasav hagoyin hanal debelayla imshachach hamelech hakadosh ein tzarich lachzar. Diaf shekvar nichnas Yom Tov asur b'melacha. Even though Yom Tov came in, it's asur b'melacha. Mikamako im le'inyan hamelech hakadosh shani. Hamelech HaKadosh is different. Why? Hamelech HaKadosh is not dependent on Kedushas Yom Tov. It's dependent on the din. Talya b'din. B'hadin talya b'kiddush HaChodesh.
Don't we say Hamelech HaMishpat in the Shmona Esrei too? In the Rosh Hashanah Shmona Esrei. Hamelech HaMishpat. We say
no, we say it during the weekday, right?
No. In the words of the Shmona Esrei.
Okay. But those words are not makiv. No, right.
Makiv either.
Those words are not makiv. Now, what would you say about the second day of Rosh Hashanah? Let's say the second night.
Same thing. Same thing.
No, it's already designated. It's the first one is said, the second one is Shiur.
Now, what's the halacha if someone forgot Yalav Yavi the second night of Rosh Chodesh?
Doesn't have to repeat.
You don't have to go back. Don't go back. So you would say the same thing about Rosh Hashanah.
Right.
That what? Lamaisa Sveika Diyoma. And regarding the second day, Bezdin, right? They're only Mekadesh B'Yom, so you shouldn't have to say it. You shouldn't have to go back. Or do we say, this is not like Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh, now listen to this. No, again, but Isra Melech has nothing to do with HaMelech HaKadosh. But what's the difference? Is it beautiful? Yeah, of course, the second day of Rosh Chodesh, you know why we don't go back? Because Bezdin was not Mekadesh, regarding the second day of Rosh Chodesh, yeah? Yesterday might have been Rosh Chodesh, or today might be Rosh Chodesh. Maybe yesterday was Aleph, and if it was Lamed, today's Aleph, right? But Rosh Hashanah is different. Because the first day of Rosh Hashanah is Aleph, the second day is Beis. It's not Lamed Elo Aleph, it's Aleph and Beis. So regarding Beis, there's no question that the Bezdin was already Mekadesh the Chodesh. So perhaps, therefore, he says, definitely you would go back. So that's the suffix he has. Is it analogous to Rosh Chodesh, or do we say no?
Why do we say by Rosh Hashanah it's Beis?
Why do we say that? Well, maybe one day we'll learn Masechta Rosh Hashanah.
We said it's closer. It's not closer.
Now, Rabbi Sai.
There's no 30 days.
Rabbi Sai. Rav Moshe Feinstein says the exact same defense for Rabbi Veli Fasvar. Look in the paragraph, the first paragraph on the second column. He says, Avada, if you said a Vachadik Shmona Esrei, Rabbi Veli Fasvaler would agree to Rabbeinu Yoina that you have to daven again. But Rabbi Veli Fasvaler is talking about you daven the Yom Tov Dika Shmona Esrei, you only forgot to say Hamelech HaKadosh. And Rav Moshe cites the exact same Gemara that Hamelech HaKadosh is dependent on the din, and the din does not begin until God sits on his throne. In the morning. Rav Moshe says, what would you do the second night? Rav Moshe says it's mistaber that you should say it again. Why? Because how could the second night of Rosh Hashanah be worse than one of the days of Aseret Yimei Tshuva?
Yeah, but the din is not effective.
You'll say, but if we're going to say you have to do it again, isn't that a bizayon too?
Rabbi, why don't we say that if you say it at night, you shouldn't have to go back because nobody's sitting in din at night. If it's related to din, the whole story is that they say the change.
Nobody says he doesn't sit at night. He doesn't begin until the day.
I thought din is only during the day.
No. God does not sit in din until the Bezdin is Makadesh the Chodesh. Once
Then he's on 24/7.
Yeah, then he's on 24/7. Then he's on 24/7. But you could say, the Rabbi said, the second night of Rosh Hashanah already, it might be the first night, and if it might be the first night, God may not have started yet. But no, it's Mustaber, he says, that it's not worse than the Aser Simei Tshuva, that you have to go back. The only thing is, if you're going to go back, that's almost like saying today's a weekday. It's a Zilzah for Yom Tov Sheni. So he says like this, since it's not so common that someone's going to say the Yom Tov Tikka Shemona Esrei, and then forget HaMelech HaKadosh, therefore, you have to go back. There's also like this. The svara that we're saying you have to go back is, even though technically maybe God has not started judging yet, but how could the second day of Rosh Hashanah be any worse than the fifth day of the Aser Simei Tshuva? Fifth day of Aser Simei Tshuva, you have to go back. So you're going to say the second night of Rosh Hashanah, you don't have to go back.
Why the first night is worse than any other night?
Because probably the first day was Rosh Hashanah, and the second day is only when the first day of the Aser Simei Tshuva. Now listen to what Moshe says. The Chayyadam is mashma that the din of Rabbi Veli Fasfeller is by both days. That just like the first night you don't go back, the second night you do go back. Says Moshe, I'll argue on him regarding that point. So it comes out, if someone wakes up early, Rosh Hashanah morning, before Neitz HaChama, listen to this. You're davening Shachris before Neitz, and you daven the Yom Tov Tikka Shemona Esrei. Right? But you forgot Melech HaKadosh? Right? Then you could say, right. Since, now here's the halacha.
Normally, it's already in the morning. What do you mean?
No, it's before night. You daven before you daven by Alois HaShachar. Now when does the courtroom convene? When does the courtroom convene? But b'diavad, if they got up earlier from Alois HaShachar, it works. So Moshe says like this: since l'chadchila you need to do it by Neitz HaChama, and they never used to do it before, like why would they wake up early? Therefore, Memela Bezdin Shamayla has not gathered yet. When does Hashem do things? L'chadchila or b'diavad? L'chadchila. So l'chadchila he doesn't start till morning. Therefore, it comes out of a tremendous chiddush. If someone davens early, wakes up very early Rosh Hashanah morning to daven, and he forgot HaMelech HaKadosh, you don't have to repeat it. So I would say, even though Reb Felder says Roiv Achroinim do not agree to this chiddush, look, the Chayyadam quotes it. The Chayyadam quotes it.
He has two that pass in one way.
And I'm saying the Chayyadam is weighed very heavily by the Mishnah Berurah. Now the Mishnah Berurah does not accept it. That I will grant. But Rav Moshe upholds it. So Safek brachos, you could say lahaka, but you don't want to get into trouble. The first night of Rosh Hashanah. So the first night, use your machzor and don't say anything with your eyes closed.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.